you're at BYU. You've reacquainted yourself with Lynn, and you marry, and you start a family, and you keep going to school. You graduated in social psychology, is that right? And then where did you go from there?
Early in my senior year, I was taking a class from the dean of the School of Religion. I think they called it back then. And he called me up one day afterwards. In my family, we grew up always debating things with each other. We'd have opening prayer at Sunday dinner, and then somebody would toss out a question, and then you just go at it, not angrily, but vigorously. And so in class, I spoke up quite often. And he called me aside and said, have you ever thought about a career as a seminary teacher? And I graduated from seminary, but I said I didn't know there was such a thing. I guess I just thought they did that for free. I don't know. But I said, no, I haven't. And he said, well, let me give you the name of a couple of guys and just go talk to them. And they said, if you take one class, then we'd be interested in looking at you. And so I did, and I liked the idea. And then that was in the fall. And then in February, I got a call on a Friday night saying their first question was, I know you only got one semester left. If you dropped out this semester, could you finish it in the summer and still graduate? And I said, yeah, because I'd just checked that out for some reason. I said, okay, how'd you like to start teaching seminary Monday? They had a teacher that had gotten very, very ill and couldn't finish out the year, and so that was another case where the career change just came along. I wish I could tell you I was smart enough to have made that choice of my own, but he just gave me another nudge, and as soon as I started that, I loved it. So I taught seminary for a couple of years, and as you know, the church education system really encourages going on for other degrees and helped us out with tuition, and so I decided to get a master's in sociology and did that at BYU.
Interesting. What, was it at high school where you taught seminary?
Yeah.
There in the Provo area?
I started in Hillcrest.
Oh, at Hillcrest up in Salt Lake.
Yeah, here in the valley.
Very familiar with
and,
that.
And then went down to Provo while I was working on my master's and taught the last year the BY High was in existence.
Getting an education and going back and forth like you were is a tremendous sacrifice and so difficult today, especially in these challenging times financially. How did you do that? What kind of counsel do you have for people who are trying to get their education and trying to hold their families together and trying to face the challenges that they have and serve in the church and all of those things? What's your counsel for them?
Well, as you know, it's so different now than what it was then. I mean, there's so many more challenges economically and so on. But as I mentioned, my dad being a smelter worker, he called us boys, the three boys, in one day, and he said, I enrolled at the University of Utah in September of 1929. And 3 weeks later, I had to drop out because of the crash of the economy. And he says, I want you to get a college education. It's the best thing you could do. But I'm sorry, I can't help you. We just don't have it financially. So if you're going to do it, you got to do it on your own. So when I went down to BYU, I looked around and found they were hiring at the mental hospital there in Utah Valley, and went up and was hired as a psychiatric attendant, worked full-time. Found out that's great preparation for being a parent and a seminary teacher.
And a neighbor and a friend.
And it was interesting. I was assigned to the psychiatric criminally insane ward, Ward 5 it was called. So anybody with any kind of a criminal record, anything from theft, shoplifting to first-degree murder, incest, I mean, we saw it all. And but I worked full-time. We had afternoon shifts and midnight shifts. We just rotated every 2 weeks, and so I worked full-time the whole time.
Wow.
My oldest brother did the same. My Grant, who's different from us, he chose to sacrifice financially. I've seen him and his wife debate over whether they could afford a 25-cent ice cream cone and finally decide to split it. And I think of that because sometimes we have young people, in my experience, who say, I can't afford it. It's too tough. It is. I mean, it was tough for us. When Lynn graduated, just before we married, she became an elementary school teacher. And she wanted to be able to have children as soon as possible. The only school district that would not fire her back then if she became pregnant was Murray. So she commuted back before there were freeways. If I raced from my midnight shift, raced as fast as home as I could, I'd get to wave goodbye to her as she drove away.
Wow.
And we did that for 3 years. And now we look back on it, and it was great. Great training, great to bind us together in that joint sacrifice. But it's worth it, and therefore, if it's worth it, there's a price to be paid.